This is Laricy Live, and I'm your host, Matt Laricy. We're giving you unfiltered access to the world of real estate, where we can cover the market trends, news, and honest answers to keep you ahead of the real estate game. Laricy Live is brought to you by Lincoln Title. Lincoln Title is the best and most efficient title company in Chicago and is the best place to close your property. Laricy Live is brought to you by Guaranteed Rate and Ben Cohen. Ben Cohen is the #1 lender in Illinois and can close your loan in as fast as 8 days. So today, we are talking about the presidential election. Let's talk politics. There's some things that they say you should never talk about, politics and religion. So I don't really think we have anything religious to talk about just yet, but we're going to have to find something to talk about because, we got to talk about two issues that we're not allowed to talk about. But, when we're thinking about talking about politics and the election, we're not going to be getting into who we like, who we support, any of that jazz, okay? What we're going to be talking about today is just how the election impacts the real estate market. What people don't realize is that the election has a huge impact on the market. Now, this is debatable, right? This could be like a presidential debate. It is debatable of whether it does or does not have an impact. Now, I believe it has a big impact on the market, and, that's why we're discussing this. And let's also remember that, the election is a very sensitive topic, and people have sides, both sides of opinion. I don't really care which side you're on. One thing that I do know as a person who's met people from all over the world and from all different countries, and I meet people, at least once every couple weeks from, countries that we're not supposed to like. That's what the government says, but we're not supposed to like these guys. And then you meet them, and they're in your car, and we get along great, and they're just really nice people. And the thing I've realized about this job in the past 20 years is that people that I meet from all sorts of countries and all sorts of corners of the world, we're all the same. That's just the reality of life, guys. We are all the same. And you know what? We all talk about the same things. We all talk about our families. We all talk about food. We all talk about what we like to drink. We all like to reminisce about some stupid things we did when we were younger, some things we want to do when we're older. And it's the same things. And you know what? People are awesome. I love people. I'm a people guy. I love people from all over the place. I get along with everybody, I feel. So when we're saying this stuff, we're not, we're not trying to get in a place where we're triggering anybody here. And I'm not even going to touch on any policies. We will be doing a podcast that is policy-based because I feel like it's our right as, people who understand the market and what these policies can do for the marketplace. But today is solely just talking about the election, okay, and how that affects the marketplace. So we're about 70-ish, 65-ish days out away from the election, so we thought this would be a very relevant topic. And the question is why does the election have an impact on the marketplace? Well, here's the thing. We're entering into one of the most polarizing, bloodiest elections probably in modern history. It's definitely the bloodiest election that I remember since I've been alive, and I'm 40 years old, and I've seen quite a few elections. I've never seen one where people are so, sit on each side and are so violently upset with the other side, no matter which one you're on. And what that does is when you have people that are very upset, it makes people second guess things, right? So if you're about to spend, you're going to spend your life savings. You saved your entire life to save money, to go buy a property, and you are so violently against the other side getting elected, you're going to probably take a step back and say, listen, I don't know if I want to spend my whole life savings that I've saved my entire life for, knowing that I think that maybe the world's going to end if somebody gets elected, okay? And so when people think about how does the election impact the marketplace? It's it makes people second guess themselves, right? Because if there is fear and there is uncertainty in the marketplace, that creates chaos, which also leads to less showings because people are I don't know if I want to go out this weekend. I'm going to go on pause till after election. And if you have less showings, okay, then you have less sales. If you have less sales, that leads to, of course, a worse marketplace. Now, I'm not being dramatic. I'm not saying the election is going to crash the marketplace, okay? And I'm not saying that we're all of a sudden going to see sales plummet down to zero, okay? Again, let's not be knee-jerk reaction. All I'm saying is that the election is going to drastically slow down the marketplace, and we can't expect that the market this fall will be as good as last fall. And the reason is because of the election. Now, the market in the fall is normally shit, okay? So it's not like it's like a gangbuster market and now all of a sudden an emergency brake gets pulled this year because there's a bloody election. No, it's just the fact that like it's going to be a little bit worse than a normal fall, which is why we dubbed this the frightful fall in our previous podcast. Now, why do people get nervous going into election season? Like, why would this lead to less sales? So, like we said, younger people who save their whole life to buy their first place are going to be nervous because, if they're very strongly feeling towards one part or the other, they're going to create fear, and that's going to make them take a step back. Now, what about other people, right? There's a lot of other younger people that are looking to buy, and they're like, well, listen, I give a crap who wins. I don't even know who the politics are. All I know about is like the Kardashian family, and they create cool makeup, right? You got a lot of those people. But here's the problem about those people, right? Those people are going to buy, and if they're younger, a lot of younger people are influenced by their parents. So they may be like, hey, mom, dad, I'm going to look. And then their mom and dad might be like, whoa, you ain't buying. They're like, what do you mean we're not buying? They're like, you know what's going on in the world? They're like, what happened? The Kardashians like makeup thing kind of go away? And they're like, no, there's an election. They're like, what's a what? They're like, there's an election. And the parents are like, you got to realize there's a big election. And the kids are like, what? I don't understand. Like, what does that have to do with anything? They're like, well, if so-and-so gets elected, that's it. And I forbid you from buying. I forbid it. And then the kids are like, well, mom, dad, like, I'm like 30. You can't forbid anything. Like, that's fine. If you ever need any help again from the future from me, I'm not going to give it to you. You can't buy until this whole thing blows over. And then the kids call me up, the 30-some-odd-year-olds, like, hey, listen, like, I know we've been, like, heavily looking, and, I want to buy, and, like, I'm totally going to do it, but I'm going to go on pause for a little bit because, like, I've talked it over with my family, and they just told me it's not a good idea to buy. Now, I know a lot of people out there saying that doesn't happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, as a guy with the biggest market share in the city, I'll tell you right now, I've already had it happen, okay? I've had like a sixth of my buyers, not a ton, but it's a good amount, already start mentioning that they're nervous about buying because of this, okay? And that exact scenario to the T. Now, I don't know what their conversations are like with their families because I'm not saying like, oh, what did your mom say to you? I just hear the thing of them saying like, well, my parents have told me that, or my family told me we shouldn't do it, or our family discussed. And as a person that uses common sense to get to where I'm at today, I'm pretty sure that's probably how the conversation goes down. Now, you may say, well, Matt, that's the first-time buyers and the step-up buyers. They're like, let's say under 45-year-olds. That's not affecting the higher-end market, right? 60-plus-year-olds or 70-year-olds or people who are retired or people who are millionaires, they don't care about the election, right? And I'm like, no, wrong. They're actually affected by the market even worse. I think luxury sales is going to plummet in October, November, okay? And you may say, well, why is that, Matt? Like, buy the dip. Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you're smart out there and you want to take advantage of the marketplace, you should buy the dip. But rich people, they get way more nervous with their money. They're going to be like, well, listen, the policies of so-and-so or so-and-so, whichever one, okay, is going to ruin the market. And if they win, my portfolio is going to drop. So I'm definitely not going to spend my money. You guys got to remember, like, rich people aren't stupid, at least for the most part, okay? They didn't get rich for being dumb. Now, did some get lucky? Did some fall on the money? Sure. But the average rich person is not an idiot. But what I do know is that one thing that rich people love is money. They love money. They love money. And you know what they don't like to do? They don't like to lose money. They hate to lose money. Rich people hate to lose. They do not want to move anything. I don't want to lose a dollar, right? So as you're running into this election season, and they say, hey, well, so-and-so may, win, and that might affect the marketplace. I don't want to lose any money, so I'm going to wait. So that's why the election impacts the luxury market is because people are afraid to lose their cash. And rich people are smart, and they think that something might happen. So they're like, okay, well, listen, I might lose some money, so I'm going to take a step back. We also have to understand that if we look at the stock market tends to be a little bit more volatile as we lead into the election. Now, somebody sent me this, and showed me that, and I looked at the graph, and from what I saw, it actually looks like the stock market kind of goes up a little bit as we lead in elections. But I also don't know the impact of like the volatility of the marketplace, whether it goes up and down. But one thing we do know is that in the beginning of August, the stock market kind of like quote unquote crashed, right? It took a huge hit. And then like, what was it, 14 days later, it had like the greatest S&P, the best week for the S&P like in history. So like you just said, you had a huge crash and then it crept back up, and that volatility scares people, right? Because if I'm rich, right, and I hate losing money, as we've already discussed, that rich people hate to lose money, and they see their portfolio take a 20% dip, they're scared, right? They're like, oh, market's ending. I'm not gonna buy $2 million place. And you may say, well, Matt, well, then the stock bounced back right back up and they got their 20% back. They did. But guess what that meant? They saw the money go. And now they're like, well, the election could have an impact on the marketplace. The stock market's up and down. You saw it, right? Like it went down and went back up. Like what if it goes back down leading up to the election? So I'm going to sit back on the sidelines. Like rich people, they just don't want to take the chance. They're not big risk takers, okay? Now, again, I'm generalizing here, okay? I have a lot of rich clients that they just love to roll the dice. They're like Vegas people when it comes to housing, okay? We're generalizing speaking, okay? And somebody's out there's like, wow, I'm still crushing it in the presidential election season. So are we. I'm crushing it in sales. That's awesome. I can talk about how great I am. It doesn't matter about how great I am or somebody who's doing successfully. We're talking about the market as a whole and generalizing people as a whole, okay? And what we're saying is that because of these situations, the real estate market's going to take a little bit of a hit during the season. I'm also a history buff. So if we look at previous elections, did we see the market drop? And we have the data to show it, at least for the past two. Now, for the Biden and Trump election, okay, back in 2020, we actually saw the market perform pretty well. It wasn't as good as it was in the summer, but it wasn't that bad. Now, the problem I have with the Biden-Trump election, why I don't think it had as much of an impact in the marketplace, is because we were locked down to like July, August, and then everybody got out, and the market went crazy because like we were just like dogs in cages, and we kicked the cage open, and like everybody was just going frantic, okay? So to me, it's hard to kind of like really say like we can compare it only to that one. If we look at the Trump and Clinton electing, that was like probably the first really bloody election I've seen as a person, or at least probably I was more aware of. I don't know, maybe you get older and you start paying attention more to this shit more, but like at the end of the day, I remember in the 16 that like the first part of 16 was like, I'll never forget, man, like we were crushing it. I'll never forget this because this was the first time that I got actually scared to be in the business because my dad always tells me, okay, like, and I'll never forget like when I bought my first place back in 2011, and I had to take a loan out from my dad because back in 2011, they wouldn't give you a loan. And I think the going rate was like 5.5% or something like that, or maybe it was 5, but he gave me 6.5%. I had to pay whatever the going rate was. I had to pay 1.5% more, and I ended up around like 6.5 or 6.6, which I still have that loan today that I have to pay my old man back. And he said like, listen, like if you can't afford something, you got to pay extra for it, okay? And this is your lesson in life. And although I hated him, I do think it kind of helped mold me to understand like how money worked. But a lesson that he told me then is that like, hey, you've had a few good years, but this is a type of business where you can lose everything really fast, and you have to plan for it. And that's why you have to understand how to save. And when he said it to me in 11 and 12, when we bought our first place, I was like, yeah, what does this guy know, right? Like, you're younger, you're like, your dad doesn't know anything. Don't we always think we're smarter than our parents, right? And then you get older and you realize, fuck, these guys were right, but you're never going to tell him that. My dad doesn't watch this, so it doesn't matter. He'll never see. But like, my point is that like, you always think you're going to be right and you know more. And I remember 16 came, and it was the first time where I realized that maybe my dad is right about this stuff. Because like, we were crushing it in 16. And then election season hit, and it was like the emergency brake pulled. You saw, showings plummet. And you saw that like things just weren't playing out as much as they were. You saw sales drop. And I remember we got fired for more listings that fall than I ever did in my career. And I really started questioning like, well, maybe this is the moment where everything gets taken away from me. And then after the election got done, the market took off like a rocket ship, and we did great. But I remember is that like I was like, wow, why did this happen? And that's when I started really studying the presidential elections and the impact it had. And I went back and looked at the data of like how many showings you can have during like the Obama and Romney election, and during the Obama-McCain election. And of course, we know the Obama-McCain election, the market was crap, but that's because the market crashed, okay? But I looked at the Romney and Obama one, and it from the data that I showed, it looked like sales took a dip as well. Not a huge dip. Again, it's not like it dropped like 100%, okay? But it definitely saw that you had a slower fall during that. So what I started to do is, as we go into presidential seasons, I prepared myself for where the market would go. And I started preparing for the market in October of last year, knowing of how the year is going to map out and how can we make adjustments. So when we do talk about this, guys, again, when we say that, what does the impact the election has on it, it's just that fear and uncertainty that makes people a little bit more nervous, to pull the trigger. So some people are saying like, well, listen, if I'm a seller, do I sell during election season, right? Is it a good idea to sell? And I would say, well, it's all relative to people out there that think that, right? Because if the election's going to impact the marketplace and there's going to be less demand, we're going to have less, showings. Is it still a good idea to show? Well, if I got a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, that's $550,000 in Lincoln Park, I'm still putting it up. Okay, and I would like to know more about your, specifics. But like if you're buying up, you'll be able to get a better deal at that point, and you're still going to sell it. You'll definitely not get as much money as you will in, February or March, but it's definitely going to be a good time to buy or to sell because like there's not going to be much competition. That market's been soft all year. But now, if I'm a seller and I got a $2 million property, and I'm in River North, I'm not putting that up in November. I'm gonna go in the pockets. I'm gonna wait till more like January. So I think if you're thinking about selling, I think it's important that you team up with a agent that's very familiar with your location, your area, and what type of property you have, so then that you guys can better understand what's the best strategy for you. But yes, the election is definitely going to have an impact on how many properties we see come on the market, because that's the other thing to know about is that this fear and uncertainty is going to lead to a lot of people to hold off on selling. Okay. And, some people have been asking, well, what about the rates? Like if the rates drop, okay, isn't that going to help out the marketplace? Now the rates have already dropped. Right now, again, I don't know when you might watch this, but we're currently sitting at August 28th. The rates are the lowest they've been since May of 23. Powell said that the rates were going to drop again in September. But what people understand is when Powell says that the rates are going to drop in September, that just means that right now the rates already kind of have that baked in, knowing that drop's going to come. But we do anticipate, and from all the indications of the economics and people who I know in the money markets, they all believe that we're going to see the rates drop even further. So what I think that's going to do is that I think that's going to keep the market alive. I think that the rate drops during election seasons are going to keep us afloat. I think it's going to keep us from seeing no sales. So I think the driving factor for people in the marketplace is and what I'm telling my buyers is this is the time to buy. You buy the dip, right? You can have the lowest rates that we've seen in, probably 18 to 19 months, maybe even more depending, how low they go in September, October. You're going to have way less demand because more people are going to be scared to buy into the marketplace. So it's this is going to be a great time to buy. So, that's something you have to think about is that, yeah, the rates aren't going to, make us have a phenomenal market. They're just going to help save us to have a better market than we probably would have had if the rates were, still hovering in that 8% range that they got to about 70 something days ago. Now, what about what happens? The question is, who's better for the real estate market? Is Harris or Trump better for the real estate market? Now, that is something we're going to debate in our election policy podcast, which you will have, which I think will be very entertaining, but also we'll probably get some. We'll see how that one goes. But yeah, that's nothing I'm going to touch on. And then what happens after the election, right? So what happens after the election? Honestly, statistically speaking, the market goes up. Okay, of course, we know that from the Obama-McCain one, it didn't go up because we were entering 2009, the real estate market bottomed out. So, if there's some sort of huge factor, we get back to lockdown or something like that. But the reality is that we're through the fear and uncertainty. I am thinking that 25 is going to be one of the best springs that we've ever seen. I think it's going to be as good or just slightly trailing 22. My reasoning behind that is the election will be behind us. The fear and uncertainty of that will be gone. People will go back to wondering what Brad Pitt's doing. And then we're going to see that, people are going to realize that, they're never going to see 2% rates again, so they're going to sell. Rents are at an all-time high. I mean, the writing's on the wall for a perfect storm to have a phenomenal spring market season. But you just have to know, short-term speaking, that we will see the market take a little bit of a hit during this presidential election season. It's nothing to be scared about. There's nothing to buy into saying the world's going to end one way or the other. All we can state is that this is going to be a normal thing to do. And the reason why I'm putting this out there is I'm getting a lot of questions of the impact it'll have. And that's all we're talking about today. So, if you have any questions on where the market is at or where it's heading, let me know. But otherwise, stay tuned for a future podcast. And thanks for listening to Laricy Live.